Hello and welcome. This interview is part of a series I am doing to publicize the 2024 Conference of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. The conference is called CSICon, and it'll take place in Las Vegas from October 24th to the 27th. Today's guest is none other than featured speaker, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Welcome, Neil, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back. Yes. Yeah, not our
Yes.
first rodeo together. Yes.
For those who don't know, let me read who Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson is. He's a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. He's an astrophysicist and the author of 17 books, hope that's up to date, including the #1 best-selling book, Starry Messenger, and Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, which spent 82 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. He's a director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History, from my old stomping grounds in New York City, and where he has served since 1996. So that short bio there, like,
You
omits
led
so,
you
so
led that bio with the fact that I'm a fellow on the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry. That's the most important thing in this conversation.
Everyone that I interview that is, I do mention that because I think that's a nice thing to
Mhm.
let people know about. So they, oh, by the way, I have to tell the people who are watching, I have your permission to not call you doctor because last time I got chastised for not being able to not call you doctor.
Oh, I didn't quite bite your head off, but uh, my concern is that if we start using honorifics like that, then it implies that you should listen to and obey the person simply because of title, rather than because they made any sense at all. And
Argument from authority. Very nice.
yes,
Yes.
I just try to diminish whatever could be a boundary between anything I say and your capacity to receive it.
So one of the things left out of the short bio that I read, which was, by the way, I read it from the website for this conference, was, of course, your involvement in 2 seasons of Cosmos. Last time we discussed that a little bit. I also interviewed Andrian for my column back in 2020, and she said, when I asked her, is there going to be another season? And she said, yes, I quote, I do intend to do a 4th season, and she gave some details about that. But I have Googled that just as recently as yesterday, and I see nothing online about it. Do you know anything?
Well, she's in charge of the franchise, so if it happens or doesn't happen, it's because it's by her choice. And people think of Cosmos as, oh, let's just have another season without realizing what kind of effort that requires. And I consider that the second Cosmos, the first of the two I hosted, did not appear for 34 years after the first one.
Right, right.
So, so to say, oh, when's the next season? I can't wait till next season. It's like, well, can I have a refractory period here before any of that kicks in again? So I know Anne had a lot of projects on her palette plate on her plate, and Cosmos was just one of them. So what I don't know, I haven't spoken to her in a while, is whether these other projects have taken center stage in her time and energy or not. But I can tell you that producing 13 episodes of a Cosmos is an extraordinary effort by so many people that I'm impressed that people just assume, yeah, let's just do that again, and have it come out 6 months from now. No, no. So I maybe, what was it? It was 6 years between 2014 and 2020, those two iterations. And those felt very consecutive to me, even though it's 6 years in between. So like I said, it's up to Anne entirely. Mhm.
So I sometimes ask folks I'm interviewing here how they got interested in either science or skepticism, and I actually just rewatched yesterday the first episode of the first season with you in it, Space-Time Odyssey, where you talked about meeting Carl Sagan. For people who don't know that story, can you tell? That was fascinating.
Oh, sure, sure. I was in high school in the Bronx, and my applications this is my senior year of high school. My applications to college were dripping with the universe. I'd been interested since I was 9, and I was I formed astronomy clubs, and I walked other people's dogs to earn money to buy a telescope and camera and darkroom equipment to get my own photographs back when darkrooms mattered for photography. And so all of this was deeply embedded in my applications to college. And after I applied, there was the colleges that had accepted me, including Cornell. And I was still deciding, and I wasn't sure, it wasn't obvious which college I would choose. And apparently that delay in decision led to a letter that I received in the mail from Carl Sagan. And the only way I can account for this is that the admissions office must have seen my application, and without having her to reply yet, decided they'd bring out the big guns. So I think they notified Carl and said, anything you can do about this one. And so he sent me a personal letter, and it's got his signature on it. There it is. And it says, I hear you're considering Cornell. I'd be happy to host you if you want to get more information about your decision. You can come by, I'll give you a tour of the lab. And whatever can work out, just let me know. And I just verified, took it to my mother. Is this like the Carl Sagan? By the way, it's before he had done Cosmos, but he was already famous. He had been on Johnny Carson multiple times. So after my mother affirmed, yes, it's an authentic letter, we made arrangements to go visit him up in Cornell. It was in December 1975. And he met me outside the building. We toured the offices, the labs, and I was in his office, and I'll never forget, he did it like a no-look reach behind him. Okay, he's facing me, but reached his arm behind him and pulls a book off the shelf, and it's one of his books. And I thought, that's badass. If you don't even have to look at whatever book you hand hits, it's just, and it was his book. Which one was that? No, it wasn't. That might have been Cosmic Connection. It was in paperback at that time, and he signed it to Neil, future astronomer. So of course I still have that book. And then, but that's not even what's impressive. It's that at the end of the day, he takes me back to the bus station, because Ithaca, New York is a bus ride from New York City. And it begins to snow, not an uncommon climactic feature of that part of New York. And he writes down his home phone number and says, if the bus can't get through, call me. You can spend the night with my family and leave tomorrow. And I just thought to myself, oh, by the way, when I went public with that information, in the comment thread, someone says, you should have just told him the bus didn't come through.
Right.
You should have just lied, right? Anyhow, so I realized, and amazed, I had these thoughts at the time. I said, I am no one to him other than an up-and-coming, aspiring scientist. And I committed myself to the fact that if I was ever as remotely famous as Carl Sagan, that I would treat the next generation of students the way he had treated me. And every time a student walks by my office door, I have big plate windows in my office. You know, I'm only slightly exaggerating when I say, if I'm on the phone, I say, Barack, I got to go. There's a student who I have to talk to. That's only a slight exaggeration. And I think of that moment every single time I meet with students. So that was, and we told a more Titan version of that in the first season of Cosmos.
Yeah, that's such a good memory. All right, so let's talk about CSICon. So before we get to talk about your upcoming one, since our last interview was about CSICon 2022, I want to talk a little bit about that. Afterwards, I saw so many selfies with you posted by skeptics, attendees on social media, that I was jealous for never having asked you for one while I was there. I actually felt guilty because I had an hour with you last time. Why am I going to take up your time when these people have never seen you? But can you tell me a little bit about what your thoughts on the conference were? What was your experience like there?
Oh, well, just I tend to be scarce at skeptics conferences for practical reasons, nothing deeply philosophical. It's just that there are so many active players in that space. people who write excellent books. There are the magazines, Skeptical Inquirer, and on the West Coast, Skeptics magazine, um, with our good friend Michael Shermer. The skeptics movement, however, at whatever size it represents, I've just judged that it has enough people that say exactly what needs to be said when it needs to be said in the platforms and media that are necessary for it. And I'm a big supporter of the movement, but for me to just show up, I always felt that I might be a distraction from the very hardworking people who are working to build and develop an entire skeptics posture within the country and around the world, because there are skeptics movements overseas, of course. And so I'm an observer of the movement. And occasionally, you know, if I think people are not saying some things that they could, that I have insights in from my own life's path, interacting with people whose tangled mental roadways prevent them from learning objective truths, then I'll step in and add some insights to it. But so that's why I'm not at this every year. Like I said, I'm a huge supporter, but I'm not. So what happens is back at the headquarters, I get the emails and the phone call. Yeah, can you make it this year? Can you make it this year? And I think 2 years ago, did I get an award? Maybe that, tipped the needle there. I don't know. But
You were the recipient of the Richard Dawkins.
yeah, I guess, yes, that's right. Yeah, so I agreed again this year, just because I have some extra things I think I can share, extra perspectives. And
So let me
yeah, but that, like I said, I want to make sure most of the attention goes to others who work mightily to try to get the country to think straight.
So let me read what your talk is going to be about this year. This is what's on the CSICon site. Your talk is titled More Cosmic Perspectives on Civilization. It's scheduled for Friday of the conference at 8 p.m. And there's a short description. It says how to use scientific rationality coupled with a dose of cosmic perspective to navigate our tribal divisions on gender, race, politics, and religion during holiday dinners. So
That's where it all comes out. You know that.
of course.
There's no tranquil holiday dinner in the States.
I
But the
know.
holiday where, the uncles and aunts and everybody comes in, and then I mean, maybe it's a testament that we do, I think, live in a country of free speech, because everyone is just going at it with their ideas. And so we want to be able to navigate that. Again, as an educator, it's important to me that you don't alienate people. You don't want to misrepresent a truth to them, but you don't want them to walk away. If they walk away, you have failed. And rather than saying, oh, they just don't want to learn or they just don't want to listen, take 100% of that responsibility and accountability for whether they heard and understood what you said. And without that, you just live in your own little bubble and complain about the rest of the world rather than trying to do something about it. My father lost him a few years ago at age 89, so it was sad but not tragic. He made sure that I knew throughout his life, because he worked very hard for social justice, that it's not good enough to be right. You also have to be effective. And if you're not effective, go home. Why we don't need you. You get to hear yourself, preach the truth. And if no one's listening, we don't need you. So this is an attempt. I think I began some of this in my last sort of apparition at the CSICon, at CSICon Vegas. And so this is a continuation of that messaging.
So yes, so at the last talk, you basically used your recently released Starry Messenger book, and you talked about important points from that. Is that what you're going to be doing for Infinity and Beyond?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to review what that talk was and where it left off, and the pieces of the book that it did not address. And I'm going to go straight there in this fall. That's correct, in October. So, and with some other insights that I've gleaned in the last year or so about how people think and forces that tribalize them, and how we can maybe disentangle that tribalization from the free flow of ideas, especially ideas that have consequences to laws and legislation.
I want to thank you for what you did at CSICon regarding your book, the newest book at the time. So for everyone who doesn't know, Neil gave an autographed copy of Starry Messenger to everyone who attended the conference. That was so generous.
I'd forgotten I did that. Thank you for, yeah.
Yeah.
I did sign every single copy.
Personal story. I got home and I unpacked my suitcase and I couldn't find the book and I was freaking out. Like somebody broke into my suitcase to steal your book and that's all they took? Electronic equipment. They just took your book.
No, they didn't want your underwear. No, I'm sorry.
Well, I had a second iPhone. Like what? And wow,
That's
this is
funny.
really an astronomy thing. Okay. And then it turns out it was like in a side pocket. I almost never unzipped it.
Okay.
All right. So the last time we talked, JWST had just released its first images, and we talked about just those first pictures. And so now it's 2 years. So what, in your opinion, in these 2 years has been the most interesting revelations, interesting mysteries revealed by the telescope?
Well, the telescope was conceived to observe the formation of galaxies in the early universe, which was an area of speculation, ignorance, and absence of data. All right. So anytime we're in that situation, you design a telescope for that purpose. And the telescope is cleverly designed to be sensitive to infrared light, which is the band of light that we would receive today from galaxies being born 13 billion years ago, because newly formed galaxies emit copious amounts of ultraviolet light. And that light passing through the expanding universe would have had its wavelengths stretched from that expansion, arriving to us in the infrared. So this is an infrared telescope designed to see ultraviolet light, redshifted ultraviolet light from galaxies being born. That band of light also happens to be exquisite for penetrating nearby gas clouds within our own galaxy to see what's going on deep inside, such as the formation of stars and planets. So here we have a single telescope that can see the formation of galaxies and stars in the early universe, as well as the formation of stars and planets right in front of our nose. So for my money, and by the way, discoveries will continue to unfold. This is the latest up to the minute of what is the most exciting. I fully expect that within months, I'll give you a different answer. But right now, the telescope, in looking in the early universe, found galaxies that were sort of oddly early in our understanding of the formation of matter in the early universe. So we've all heard of the cosmic microwave background. That's where light went free throughout the universe rather than getting absorbed and scattered by atoms to be, right? You have free floating electrons. They scatter light, and so light cannot pass through the universe at the time. As the universe expands and cools, the electrons get reabsorbed into the atoms, reattached, and then light runs free. We see that light, okay? Fine. But after that, how about starlight? Well, the matter has to continue to cool and condense before it turns into anything familiar, like stars and galaxies. So there's a gap in the early universe where no stars yet exist. And we call that the Dark Ages. Okay? Of course, borrowing our cue from, from the history of civilization, the Dark Ages. And in the Dark Ages, we don't expect anything to be there. Our understanding of the formation of stars and other gatherings of matter tells us we don't expect anything there. We turn on the James Webb Telescope and bada bing, 4 or 5 galaxies show up right in that area. And then we all went, our heads were scratching. And of course, the press loves headlines that's like, oh, scientists have to rethink the Big Bang. They're thinking that they go to the sort of the maximum change that might be required
I've
with
seen
new.
JWST destroys cosmology.
Yeah. So this is that makes it's clickbait, but it's not actually what happened. Okay, so either all of cosmology is wrong, which is backed up by decades of data and telescope observation, or our understanding of the formation of galaxies needs adjustment. Okay, so the press wants us to throw away the Big Bang because they think it's a tentative understanding of the early universe, which it isn't. It's a highly data supported theory of the early universe. So I held a panel debate at my home institution, the American Museum of Natural History. We hold one of these every year in honor of Isaac Asimov. It's called the Asimov Panel Debate. And you can look it up, dig it up. It took place just a few months ago. So Isaac Asimov Panel Debate 2024, it should be online, where I have the experts in the early universe, theorists and observers. And that's where we learn that there were certain assumptions we had made about what a galaxy would or should look like. And those are the assumptions that needed to be adjusted about the galaxies, not about the entire universe in which it was embedded. And so that's why you're not seeing headlines about it anymore, because we're kind of wiggling our way through these uncertainties. But the James Webb Space Telescope is doing exactly what it was designed to do, to give us data that can guide us in our understandings of the formation of galaxies. So we shouldn't be shocked that it shocked us. It was exquisitely tuned to hand us data right in our pockets of ignorance. That's exactly what it did.
So you mentioned the Isaac Asimov Memorial Debate. I actually have a question about a previous one you did. Because I wrote an article for AIPT Science talking about, are we living in a simulation? And if you recall the topic of that 2016 debate, there was a quote from you that I put in my article. I wish I could summon a strong argument against the simulation hypothesis, but I can find none. And it says you put the odds at 50-50. Have you reconsidered that in the years?
Oh, so the 50-50 is actually sort of a more thought out construct. The 50-50 is where I had arrived after I thought it was pretty much hopeless. Okay, so the hopeless scenario is, and this is, I'm basically paraphrasing the ideas that I first saw put forth by Nick Bostrom, the philosopher at University of Oxford, where he just said, if we're this good at simulating worlds on a computer, then what's to stop us from simulating a world where there are players, actors, characters in that world that think they have free will? If they do, maybe they want to create a world within their world. And so they have to invent computers and make them fast. And there's a whole world. And so then they create a world within their world. And then what's to prevent them from creating a world? They would just do this all the way down. Okay, it's turtles all the way down. And now you close your eyes and throw a dart. Which of these universes are you most likely to hit? One of the simulated ones or the original one that started it all? So just think statistically about this. We are likely in a simulated universe. And I could not find a good way out of that until I had conversations with friends of mine, one of them, J. Richard Gott, who's a colleague at Princeton, and a co-author of mine of a textbook that we co-wrote with a third professor. The three of us all co-taught a course when I was at Princeton, and that became a book. It's called Welcome to the Universe, if anybody's interested. I think it's a very readable textbook. So you can have it on your coffee table and not think about it.
That's an interesting title for a textbook.
That's why I'm saying that's the whole point.
Right.
It's a very, in fact, I wish I could say it when you pick up the book. I wish I could say it while you pick up the book. Welcome. It's like, whoa, what's that? So that'll get you to open the book and find out what's
There are
going
greeting cards that you open them and they say
on.
something.
Exactly. Yeah,
Definitely
talking
does.
textbook.
Yeah.
So here's the way out of that, you know, million to one odds that we're not in a simulation. It's that today we do not yet have the capability to perfectly create a world. We don't have that ability. So we can't be any of the worlds in between that have the ability to make another world. So we're either the last one who is still fumbling with their discoveries and inventions to make a world, and they're just not there yet, or we're the first one who are still figuring out how to get the first one going. If that's the case, then it's a 50-50 chance. 50-50.
Ooh, I don't know, Neil. Let me look image this like a tree, like the tree of life.
Now we can get more complicated and we can say maybe the simulators enjoy simulating worlds that do not have the ability to simulate a world. Okay. Uh, However, there's a way to address that, and you can ask in our movies that we make, what fraction of our movies are set, because that's kind of a simulation if you think about it in that way. What fraction of the movies we on purpose make that take place in the era where we've had movies? Okay. It's something like 2/3 of all movies are cast at a time when we've had movies. So basically, the last 100-something years, even though civilization has been around for tens of thousands of years, okay, or modern humans, tens of thousands, we are simulating storytelling on a screen that is only taking for most of what we create only in the last 100 years. So if that's any indication, maybe this alien simulator feels the same. They want to create a simulation that exists in the era of simulations, and that becomes the goal rather than have this whole set of simulations where nobody's simulating anything. That might be very boring to them. Now, who am I to think the motives of an alien? But, but if humans are any indication at all, this is a way to boost our odds from a million to one that were real to 50-50 that were real.
I just hope we're not being used as batteries because that's just a stupid answer.
Oh yeah, that battery thing. I mean, that's the weakest point
Oh,
in the movie The Matrix, of
yeah.
course. That you know, somebody must have, maybe one of the producers, the writers, the directors must have read somewhere that the human body radiates at 80 watts or like 100 watts if you're particularly energetic, and that's an energy source. Let's tap that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but without the and maybe that works if you knew nothing of the second law of thermodynamics, but something had to give the energy to the human to generate the 80 watts of power to begin with. And that's not a perfect conversion from the energy ingested to the energy that is expressed. So the machines in the Matrix should have just fed themselves whatever it was they were feeding the humans.
Right. The Wachowskis were brighter than this. I've seen a lot of YouTubes because I love that movie series. And apparently the original script had the humans in those pods to use their brain capacity, not the power thing. And the studio exec said, no one's going to understand that. Make it power.
Is that right? I have an original script. I want to go back to it. How early is that script that you're referring to?
I don't remember. It was a YouTube video discussing the series in detail and why they made choices they
Well,
made.
that's good to know because
Yeah.
there's so much else that's so well thought out
Yeah.
in that film.
Yeah.
It would to me it would be odd that the Wachowskis would not have known
Yeah.
this thermodynamic fact.
Right.
So it's easier for me to believe, given how well they did everything else, that this was a force imposed upon them
Yeah.
from on high, saying, no, we have to simplify
Yeah,
this.
because no one's going to get that. They'll understand the copper top, and we like the copper top reference. Use that. That was it.
It's the one weak point. Everything else is
Yeah.
quite strong.
Yes.
So I'll give him a hall pass on that. It's like the weak point in the movie The Martian. All right. No,
The
Dust storms on
storm,
Mars are not
right?
going
The
to blow
storm on
over.
Mars.
They're not
Yeah.
going to blow over your spacecraft because it's
No.
the air pressure is 1/100th that on Earth. It'd be like a gentle breeze. And but he knew this. He was self-aware. This is the author
Andy
Andy
Weir.
Weir, and by the way, he handed me one of the highest compliments I ever received. It was, Neil, when I was writing this book, because he's an engineer turned novelist, when I was writing this book, I imagined you were looking over my shoulder. And so he would triple check his calculations because he didn't want me tweeting about it
So
after.
what is his explanation? Again, I'm an engineer and designed spacecraft and just knew about that. That was wrong. And I read the book before I even knew they were making a movie, and then they kept it in the movie. It's like, why did he do that? Do you know why he did
No,
that?
he needed some mechanism. And
Oh,
so, like I said, you got to give him a hall pass on that. I am big enough a person to give him a hall pass. My generosity as a critic of sci-fi is such that if you need something to make the entire thing work, I'll give you a hall pass.
Different topic. I posted to Facebook that I was going to be interviewing you, and I had some of my followers who want to ask you some
Oh,
questions,
sure,
and I
sure.
picked out a few. Have you ever believed in something supernatural? Asks Klaus Larson, a skeptic.
Um, I've tried, when you're coming up as a child and holding aside the fact that my the religion of my household was Catholic. Actually, that overstates it. The religious tradition in which I was raised was Catholic, but my household was secular. So we went to church each week, but at home, at no time did either of my parents say, "What would God think? What would Jesus think? You got to go to confession." There was no such influence in the household. Everything was, here's what you should or shouldn't do, and here's the rational reasons for it. Not that you'll burn in hell or go to heaven. So, in that kind of environment, by the time I was 8 or 9, it was pretty clear that what I was being taught did not correspond with objective reality. And so, you'd be taught that God always sees you. And I said, well, if I'm in a corridor and I'm not near a window, can he still see me? So you start thinking these experiments. So I don't know if that counts as believing in something supernatural. Um, the Anne Druyan once said, and I partly agree with her account, agree for myself with her account of herself. She said she imbues way too much power and truth in fortune cookies. so so I remembered fortune cookies. Well, this is China. This is a great civilization from go back millennia. And whether or not it was later invented as a kid, you don't know or care. It's you're in a Chinese restaurant and it comes out. And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if this is true. And then it doesn't take long to realize that no, it's not. So I have to say the answer is no. No. And whereas for many other people, it is easy to think magically and supernaturally. And so if that's the case, is it like some people like mathematics and other people it's just impossible? Is it a brain wiring? And here we are arguing in the streets about ideas when in fact we should be exploring differences in brain wiring. All right. And so, yeah, no, I haven't been. But as an educator, I have a soft spot for those who do and those who are. And this is a way softer spot than anything ever expressed by Richard Dawkins. Okay. Again, it's not that I accommodate, it's that I'm just softer in my conversations. If you are trained to continue to ask questions, like my two kids, all right, my wife, by the way, has a PhD in mathematical physics. So we have a scientifically literate household. Our two kids, by the time they were 12 or 13, certified scientifically literate,
Right.
certified. At that point, I said, I don't care what grades they get in school, what college they go to, what they major in. They will never be exploited by someone else who claims they have some access to the operations of nature that are not
Yeah.
otherwise that will not otherwise succumb to inquiry. So we'd be at a table, it's 13, right? And a grown-up at the table said, well, Mercury's in retrograde, so I don't know if I should do that. You'll calmly listen and say, well, so what exactly is happening with Mercury that it's in retro? And do you realize that it's not actually moving back? They would do this, but in a educational sort of pedagogical way, rather than again just declare some. And I said, okay, they're good. I'm done here. So I think that's what I was at the time. You believe it at first until you think about it more. And if you don't think about it, they just keep pumping you with it. And then it's, there's another one. Did we go to the moon? We can ask, well, you saw the rocket take off, right? You can actually calculate how much fuel is in the rocket. It's enough fuel to go to the moon, go around the moon, go down to the moon, go back up, and come back to Earth. It's enough fuel to do that. So, like, where do you think it was going? To like the Piggly Wiggly up the street? No. Okay. Oh, and you have to say, oh, we didn't go to the moon 9 times. Okay. We didn't go to the moon 9 times. So my favorite reply there was, okay. So NASA was afraid that we wouldn't get to the moon and we had to get there before the Russians. So they went to Hollywood and they say, we want to fake this, but you can't tell anybody. So they go to Hollywood and Hollywood studies the problem at great length. And they go back to NASA and they say, yeah, we can fake the moon landing, but to make it most authentic, we should film it on location. So NASA fakes the moon landing on location.
Susan Garbick, who's a CSI fellow, asked you, she's concerned about leadership in the skeptical movement. She wanted to know your thoughts on focused activism, that you tend to stick to general topics. What do you think about, keeping things general or being specific about things?
Yeah, so I think there's room on all fronts there. Dare I call them fronts? That's kind of a military term. I apologize for that. But it kind of is that when you think about the efforts and the organization and the tactics necessary to succeed. I would say that you're right. I speak more generally about thinking rationally rather than specifically. I don't enter debates, for example. You've never seen me in a debate. I don't debate religion. I don't debate Bigfoot. I just don't. I don't want to give platform to ideas that are objectively false, because it implies that when you debate, whoever wins the debate is right. And no objective truth should ever be decided that way. Yet, so the debates go to the most charismatic, or the person who is that tells the best jokes or makes you feel more comfortable. And someone who might be an expert, who doesn't have those kind of social graces, will lose every debate they enter, even if they are correct in what it is they're arguing. So I tend to stay away from targeted skepticism. I guess that's the term she used. What I do, so my goal as an educator is getting people to think straight in the first place, on the hope, or rather, let me make a stronger statement, on the expectation that if I get you thinking straight in the first place, you are no longer susceptible to thinking in those variety of ways. And yeah, if you pick apart someone's 9/11 denying and then, okay, maybe you won that, but now they're still thinking 12 other things. I don't know that picking apart one successfully unravels others. Whereas if you get to the base of how the brain is wired for that way of thinking, my expectation is that it's a more potent path to undoing what could be multiple non-skeptical belief systems that live simultaneously in the brain of individuals.
Thank you. So in the vein of specifics, some scientists, including Mishikaku, has thrown his belief behind that we now have to prove that the aliens aren't here because the evidence is so overwhelming. Have you talked about this subject?
Yes, on the news in particular, but not that specific statement made by Michio, but just, when the hearings were going on and the quote evidence put forth in Congress, yeah, I had a lot to say about it. Yeah. Do you have a specific question regarding it, or?
Yeah, yeah. What would you say about that comment that Misha made, which is basically that, now we have to prove they're not here?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, he's not an experimentalist, he's a theorist. So, but that alone shouldn't preclude his awareness of what constitutes evidence. Um, so evidence is not simply, here's a satchel of things that I can't explain, therefore they are aliens. Now prove they're not aliens. The fact that you can't explain it, that gives justification to the word unidentified. That's why the U is in UAP and in UFO. That's why it's there. So it's those abbreviations don't stand for unidentified aliens. Okay, they're just objects, and we don't know what it is. So I have no problems with people gathering better data for this. NASA had a committee chaired by a good friend of mine, David Spergel, who he got together some various experts, and what they concluded is that what NASA should do is put together let's call it an app for now, but it could be something more extensive than that, where since everyone has a smartphone and a geolocated image taking device. And so you can take pictures of what it is you don't understand and link that up to the site, and it will geolocate it in case other people saw the same thing. You can then triangulate on it. It'll get a distance. You can get the luminosity, the time of day, all of this, so that there is an organized collection of data and not just the farmer in the backyard or someone staggering out of a bar at 2 a.m, or even a Navy pilot who, we think that people of title are better observers of phenomena than people without title, whereas the only variable there is that, are you human? If you're human, you have certain susceptibilities to the conversion of what your senses experience in front of you to what you then retell as your declaration of fact. And so it doesn't matter what your rank and serial number is. So at no scientific conference did anyone say, this is true, I saw it, you have to believe me.
Right.
That said no scientist ever, right? So that's what we need. We need better data. That's fine. But lights in the sky you can't explain, or anything that you can't explain, okay, you can't explain it. I'm good with that. Let's try to better data is what you seek when you're at an impasse, rather than making declarations about what it is to then require someone to say that it isn't. So I think any experimentalist would completely resonate with what I just said, whether or not theorists think the same way.
Yeah, the real disappointing thing there was, and there's been a ton of articles written about this, including by myself, this situation is because the Navy videos have all been well explained by skeptics, including Mick West. There's a movie, the UFO movie, They Don't Want You to See, by Skeptoid Media, which 20 minutes interviewing Mick, showing how he made the calculations. They just have normal explanations for everything in those videos, and yet it's like, I can't explain this. It's going a speed that's impossible by modern technology, which is really disappointing because the data is already out there to show that's not what this is. Anyway, okay, so wrapping this up, have you seen the CSICon speaker list? Anyone that's coming this year you haven't met before and are really looking forward to meeting?
There's always someone I haven't met, and so I tend to know what their work is and what they work on more than I know them as an individual or their personalities. And so I look forward to attending as many sessions as I can. I look forward to seeing Brian Cox again. We became fast friends over in the UK, and he did a tour through the United States, and we connected then as well. We're sort of kindred spirits on opposite sides of the pond, and it's always good to just have lunch with him and compare notes, really, what's working, what's not, what tactics are necessary. what impasse is, and has he come up with solutions that I haven't, or vice versa?
So I think this is a good place to end the
All
interview.
right.
I want to remind everybody that there'll be no CSICon next year. And when they resume in 2026, well, Neil might not be there. So if you're going to plan on attending and meeting Neil, this is the time to do that. All right. So thank you very much for joining me again, Neil. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vegas. And this time, maybe I'll even ask for a selfie.
All right. Thanks for having me.